in chat. Let us know. Yes, we're on. Okay. What's good, guys? Yes, TSG and Scoriox presenting another episode of Augment. And guys, we have, honestly, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I will anyway, my favorite guest, Santiago, back on with us. Man, always a blessing to have this guy on and just chat just everything, right? So I'm super excited. Before I actually give Santi the chance to speak, obviously I do need to say Augment is sponsored by Illuvium. So one, appreciate that. There's so much that Illuvium is doing right now. A lot of news with Private Beta 2, Illuvitas to look forward to, Illuvium 0 to look forward to. There's a lot on the Illuvium Twitch channel. So there's just so much leaks. Andrew's coming out with Illuva Talks and Illuvium Showcase every week. Rich, the community manager, is doing Cucker's Cave. Like, there's a lot. There's no way you're going to remember all of that. So just join the Discord. That's probably the best way. But apart from that, Santiago, what's up, man?
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on again, and it's and for all the work that you do to evangelize Illuvium, because it's a really fun game, and I think it's a really neat community. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Nah, I'm so excited, man. Obviously, we're going to talk some Illuvium because that's what we have to do. But there are other topics that we'll discuss today as well. And actually, without let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into it, because as you can see, it is late for Scoriox, and we don't want to keep him up.
It's quite late for Scoriox.
Yeah, he can't even have the lights on. It's that late.
Yeah,
all right, so Santi, let's get straight into it, man. The first topic that we kind of want to talk about today is regarding ETH and the ETH Merge, right? Because that's been a hot button topic right now. That's meant to be coming on the next couple of weeks. So the question I want to ask, and it's because it's happened before, what do you think about the ETH Merge? Do you think we're going to see it being postponed like we have previously? What's your take on all of that?
No, I think it's pretty set in stone at this point, and there's been so much work leading up to it that this years in the making, and so I don't see a reason why it would be delayed. I think there might be, as always in crypto, you can expect some drama. Obviously, if there's going to be a fork and how people think about censoring nodes and all this stuff, with given everything that's going on with Tornado, but generally I think it's I don't see any delays at this point, especially because there's been multiple tests, and I think validators kind of have done multiple, different clients have done multiple tests and testnets, and so I think it's pretty set in stone at this point.
Pretty set in stone, yeah. All right, so one thing I wanted to ask, man, because I'm actually not gonna lie, I'm, as a content creator, as a participant in this marketing community, I'm definitely more focused on the gaming side of things. So I'm actually not too clued up on the whole back end of the cryptocurrencies per se, and I'll openly admit that. Something that I've been hearing a lot about, and I don't fully understand it myself, is I'm hearing that they're saying that they're calling the ETH Merge a triple halving. So obviously, most of us have heard of the Bitcoin halving. To get heard of a triple halving before, is there any way that you could break that down and explain to us, or to those of us that don't know what that is, and your opinions on it? Do you think it's accurate? Do you think it's just people kind of hyping it up, or misinformation? What do you think?
I'm not too familiar. I have heard this term before. I think the Bankless guys like to use it. ETH is a triple point asset, and the idea that ETH transitions to proof of stake makes it, I guess, more compelling for a variety of reasons. I guess putting aside what they mean by that, I'll tell you why I think this is in my opinion, and look, none of this is legal, financial, or any type of advice, but why I think this is a pretty interesting milestone for Ethereum. One, it further credentializes just the development of the network. There's been talks about transitioning to proof of stake for years, since the early days of Ethereum. And so over the years, there have been delays, and there have been criticisms that Ethereum, is not going to deliver on that roadmap. And here we are, right? We are, weeks away from that happening. And so it further lends credibility to the development that goes on at the Ethereum Foundation, ETH core developers. And so it's, I think that point number one. Point number two, I think obviously it becomes, the Ethereum networks becomes much more energy efficient, like 99.9% more energy efficient. And there are a lot of participants that have been critical of proof of work networks because they consume a lot of energy. And so obviously that there are certain investors that are more sensitive to this, and we call this ESG, like environmentally friendly type of investing strategies. And so that is pretty interesting and important. So that would be the second point. The third is, from my understanding is, when you think about what happens in a proof of work network, you have certain participants, i.e. miners, that buy this equipment and spend all this CapEx and then quickly need to recoup that cost and then replace those chips, those ASIC miners, ASIC chips to become a competitive miner. And so there's always constant selling pressure from miners in the space in a proof of work network. And they don't necessarily have the best interest at heart, like long-term of a network. Ultimately, you need to secure the network. You're securing the network, in this case, in proof of work, by expending energy, which is a finite resource. And then, so that is a huge signal in what the value of the reward, block reward is, i.e. Bitcoin. You're earning that coin. And so that intrinsically has some value tied to the commensurate to like the amount of energy that is being spent. And when you think about, in a proof of stake context, it feels to me like there's just more alignment between holders of a token that are also staking it, depositing in a smart contract to provide validation, and that removes a lot of sell pressure. And I think it aligns the incentives of the different stakeholders of a network to provide security by staking and validating, without necessarily having a very clear sell pressure. Sure, there might be some folks that stake ETH and earn some reward and are like running some strategies to just capture the staking yield, like absolutely. But it feels to me like a more sustainable strategy to provide security for a network. Now that's not to say that it's a perfect strategy. There are some criticisms around, hey, look, there's a fair amount of concentration among ETH holders, and so like it rewards them, and so it becomes that type of, I guess some people are critical of that. But I'm less concerned about that. I mean, I think one of the few things that don't get talked about enough in the Bitcoin context is this idea of how do you provide security once all 21 million Bitcoin have been issued. And like a lot of people say, well, we have plenty of time. That's like 100 years out or whatever. And at that point, Bitcoin might look really differently, and we just don't know. So it's not worth like spending much time on that. But I think if you're like holding Bitcoin, like you kind of like have to think about that today. It's
you
like,
should think about that.
Like right now, like 90+%, I think it's like 99, it's like low 90% of all fees that are being generated by the Bitcoin network are in block rewards, and very few are actually transaction fees. So it's a big unknown. I'm not like saying this to panic, but it's just something that should be talked about more. In a proof of stake context, I mean, it's just more interesting because you have these block rewards, and I think there's a fee network in Ethereum that is quite substantial, and it just provides a more sustainable kind of strategy to secure the network. One important, and I'll end by saying this: there's very important to understand that like the merge and the transition to proof of stake doesn't solve scalability per se. So like, a lot of people like think it does, and that's not the case. Scalability is solved by layer 2s, not by transitioning to proof of stake. That has nothing to do. So fees actually might stay the same. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear, because certain people tend to think that all of a sudden Ethereum is going to be highly scalable because it's proof of stake, and that's actually not the case. So
I think you touched on Tornado, and I haven't actually done a lot of my research into that yet, but I have heard some things around about. Could you explain the Tornado Cash situation and how that applies to Ethereum?
Yeah, so Tornado Cash, the protocol, is a mixer in the sense that like it provides privacy. You deposit your ETH, and you get fractions of that ETH deposited back, and it provides certain anonymity. And so this has been used by a number of people. Of course, the U.S. Treasury issued put sanction Tornado and certain addresses that have been using Tornado. In my assessment, because if you look at the Ronin hack, like over 600 million of like assets were stolen and then laundered, unless I don't necessarily like that word, but laundered through their Tornado Cash protocol to then cash out. And hackers would want to use this because then it like provides, it sort of cleans the coins, because you can understand like when and so you can understand why the U.S. government might be very against that, because all of a sudden an enemy, the Lazarus Group, which is tied to North Korea, and it's sort of a well-known thing, all of a sudden got like up to a bit, like it has, I think, up to $1 billion of hacks, and it's used Tornado to try to cash out. And so that was the context. It's interesting and important because like all of a sudden you transition to proof of stake, and then it begs the question, well, one, what else are they going to want to sanction and ban? I mean, you can't like stop a smart contract, but you can stop people from interacting. Like if you're using Tornado, then all of a sudden you might be sanctioned. It's if you have USDT, that could be frozen. And in fact, Circle froze like 75,000 of USDC that were in some addresses that have interacted with Tornado. And so then all of a sudden it's like, well, are we going to see more of these type of actions against other protocols that might be interacting with Tornado in some way, shape, or form, or certain known like sanctioned wallets that are tied to, I don't know, like terrorism or some criminal activity, or using like LPs and Uniswap. All of a sudden you can't use Uniswap, like just as a hypothetical. So it's an interesting precedent. I don't think it's going to go that far. I think just Tornado is one of the very clear like end of like the Ethereum network, where people are just using it to like try to clean the money. And it's important from a proof of stake standpoint, because if you're running validation, then that's different than a miner, in the sense that you're actually placing a rubber stamp on that particular block. And what happens if you are providing validation on a particular block that has Tornado funds in it, and then if you're a validator in the US, well, that you can't do that. That's criminal activity, because then you're enabling like criminal activity. And so this is not new, I will say. And I recorded a regulatory podcast yesterday with Jake Javinsky and Rebecca Redding. In my opinion, that two of the best like lawyers and regulatory experts in the space, and everyone should go listen to that, and then we can talk about it further. But the Bitcoin network, like the Bitcoin miners, like have talked about this and understand this, and so there are ways to like not accept certain transactions in a particular block from wallets that, like, I'm butchering the terminology because they're technically not wallet, but anyways, there are cents that are blocked, certain funds or transactions being included in a block that are like known addresses that are like tied to criminal activity. So I think we're just going to have to work around that, and validators are going to have to get smarter on a way to censor certain transactions that are on a sanction list. And I think I think the technical solution to this that is both regulatorily compliant and appeasing of law enforcement agencies and governments around the world, because I think we all are in agreement that we don't want to be enabling and supporting criminal activity.
Yes, I think we all agree there.
I think I did see a Twitter thread that says that, like, if you transact with very specific addresses and things like that, even if you don't mean to, you can be tied to criminal activity and even have sanctions placed on yourself and things like that. So it's going to be something that everyone needs to navigate in the space, and it's just one of those things we're going to have to learn to deal with. So we'll move on to the next one. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about the Ethereum fork and what that means and everything like that. Obviously, I'm relatively familiar with forks, but I haven't been in the space nearly as long as yourself and as many people, so I wasn't even around for the Ethereum Classic fork. Could you explain what a fork is, and maybe a small history into Ethereum Classic and how that might apply to the potential fork that we could be seeing with Ethereum?
Yeah, basically, simplistically, is a fork happens when like certain miners don't agree on a particular version of the chain, and so they a fork, and it creates a separate version. And then you have certain certain miners that support if there's like in a particular block, you have a miner that broadcasts a particular version of the chain, and then another one that broadcasts another. And so most of the time, one is dropped, and then there's a dominant chain, and that's it. A fork is, for existing like Ethereum Classic or so. It's when like miners kind of don't, certain subset of miners don't agree, and then they run off and they keep building blocks on top of that chain. And so historically, like forks have been largely unsuccessful, and just, in my opinion, just like distractions and money grabs for certain people, like Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum Classic, which was a result of the DAO hack. And so, yeah, I mean, you could argue, I guess, like Ethereum Classic is worth like what, 8 billion. So, I mean, but Ethereum's like Ethereum proper, as you see today, is over 10 times larger than that.
I think
Much more than that.
Yeah. I think the tricky thing for me is, from my understanding, I think Ethereum Classic was actually the original Ethereum, and then the Ethereum was actually the fork, which grew to be the larger one.
Correct.
What I'm wondering here, and I'm not sure if you have the answer for me, but if we did have a fork from proof of stake and proof of work, which blockchain would be the original one? What dictates that?
Well, I guess like the consensus view. It's sort of like the relevant question is what most people agree on. And I think you've seen a lot of support from just the proof of stake chain. And it's really just a subset of miners that are like advocating for this proof of work fork. And there have been a number of large players, including exchanges and service providers like Circle, saying we're just going to support the proof of stake version of if a fork happens. And ultimately, blockchains are coordination and consensus mechanisms, and so the truth is a social construct. And so if you have to look at like where most of the activity and people's different stakeholders are going to support which version of the chain. And I think largely you've seen overwhelming consensus on a proof of stake version of Ethereum. And I think that's the right one. I'm not supportive, and I don't think that a proof of work this fork is, as I said, I think forks are distractions, particularly this one. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So regarding like the forks and everything like that, again, because I claim ignorance on this topic, with a lot, like obviously right now, not everyone, but a vast majority of people that are holding Ethereum and using Ethereum, they are like staked in different liquidity pools here and there, right? So if we do experience a fork, what actually happens to that in the liquidity pools? Like, yeah. Like, I don't even know how to ask this question, to be completely honest. Like, what happens to the tokens that are staked right now in liquidity pools if we do fork? Yeah, that's really what I don't know how to.
I don't have a good answer for this. I actually don't have a good answer for this, so I'm not an expert on this. So
that's fine.
I'm not the right person to ask.
That's fine. That's fine. All right, so we can move on then. All right, so I think this might be a question that you actually have an opinion on then. A question you have an opinion on. So right now, like one of the things that I've been seeing is that retail investors are actually getting access into seed opportunities via certain protocols like ALIN and things like that. I know they're partnering up with ETH Lizards to have like an NFT gated seed opportunity, things like that. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on retail investors having that opportunity to get into the seed? Are you for that, against that? Are there things that we need to be cautious of? What's your take on that?
No, I mean, I'm super supportive of getting the community, and I think the retail institution like nomenclature is largely irrelevant. And I get why people use it, but I like to think of like who's a more knowledgeable person to be investing in a particular protocol or company. And time again, you see a lot of community members that are super knowledgeable about a particular protocol, are involved early on, and they should have. Like, I see no reason why they shouldn't have the opportunity to participate in early rounds if they believe in that, if they are knowledgeable about that, if they understand the risks. Like, I see no problem with that. And in fact, I think it's very healthy for a protocol to allow the community and members that are contributing to participate in the earliest of stages. Like, I think, we've largely, unfortunately, been in this dynamic where, these like classifications of accredited investor and non-accredited investor are like really archaic, don't make much sense. they're like, why is it that like if you make 100,000 or 200,000 combined, like that should be the litmus test by which determines if you can invest in like these early stage things. It's like, no.
Yes.
And look, I mean, I think you look at something like Ethereum, that's single-handedly the piece of technology that's created the most amount of millionaires and wealth for the most diverse group of individuals, because anyone can participate in the ICO. And a lot of it was just people that put in, you know, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, however amount, because they believed in it, and they were, you know, like all of us, kind of like early believers and geeks in it. And so, why is it that, like, it just, to me, that has always been one of the more fascinating like tenets of the space, which is these are open source networks. Anyone can contribute, and if you're contributing, you should be compensated for that. And contribution doesn't always mean, oh, are you pushing code? No, are you like you guys, like, you know, are you adding value to these networks that is not just technical value? There are other types of value that one can contribute. And I see no reason why people we shouldn't democratize access to these investment opportunities, whether it's through ALAN or just direct investment. And I think, look, ultimately, like, we're trying to work around like existing like laws and regulations, but I think there should be innovation. Like, new piece of technology should be met with innovation around rules and policy making. That, like, you know, I think this is a new movement and paradigm, and we should have new laws and regulations. Absolutely. You know, and so I think, as long as people understand the risk and they do the homework, like, I see no reason why not.
Yeah, because I agree. Because that was one of those things, like you mentioned as well, like the whole accredited investor. Like, I thought it was such a arbitrary kind of thing to say like you can't. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So
at this point, it's nonsense. Maybe it made sense like 100 years ago or something, or like 50 years ago,
correct.
But not today.
Yeah, I agree. I think democratizing the opportunity makes complete sense. This is why I think that a lot of people, especially like young people like us, flock towards crypto, because that's where we see the opportunities and we're not being walled out. So opening it up even further, like you say, as long as we do that research and understand the risks, I completely agree. I think, Scoriox, you wanted to go?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, yeah, even I had a lot of trouble trying to get an options account happening. I think Australia is a large part of it, but just I found it very unrealistic that I couldn't have the opportunity to try these financial instruments. I mean, it's my money. If I want to go and lose it, that should be my prerogative, quite frankly.
Already been taxed on it, so what's the problem?
Yeah.
So I tried many different platforms and things, and they all just blocked me out, either because I was from Australia or because I didn't have enough financial experience or whatever. I thought that was a bit ridiculous. So I like the idea of crypto moving us forward.
Like, ask me a set of questions that provides that I'm a knowledgeable person. And this is actually a definition now, that in lieu of being an accredited investor, you can prove knowledge. If you're like an insider, if you work at the company, or if you just prove general knowledge about a particular topic, whether it's option trading or structured products or whatever, and done. Like, you know. So very much so.
Yeah, I think it's wild. I think it's wild that they allow you to go to, like, at 18, they allow you to go to the casino and like gamble it. Like, that's allowed, but investing is like, there's so many restrictions and limitations on that. I think that's insane. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're going to swing it back to NFTs briefly, and then we're going to move into GameFi and really delve down that rabbit hole again. I know that's what a lot of people in the audience are probably waiting for, but just quickly, OpenSea volume is at an all-time low. All right. So if crypto sees a resurgence, do you think PFP NFTs and NFT artwork and things can relive the glory days of 2021?
I see you smirking straight away.
Well, it's anyone's best guess. But look, are NFTs and the idea of collecting, is that going to go away? No. Like, humans love to collect stuff. And now, more importantly, people understand that you have an ability to create a digital identity. And there's I guess simplistically, these are, you have created the possibility to have digital scarcity with blockchains, and those can be represented with tokens, like, fungible tokens and particularly non-fungible tokens, which have more uniqueness to them. I mean, they're non-fungible. And so, I don't think it goes away. Like, absolutely not. Now, I am, like, at some point there's just too much, there's like fatigue in the market. I think a lot of people are like, oh, another mint, like, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Like it just has felt that I would be skeptical of projects that just want to get away with doing a simple PFP drop, 10,000 NFT drop, and then just be like, fine. I think at some point you want to understand, is there like something behind this? Like I'll tell you why I buy certain NFTs is because I either like the artist and it speaks to me, some like people pleaser, or like people. I don't know. I never bought a people. I don't like this art. No disrespect, but I do like other pieces of art, and I like the artist, and so I want to support it. Like I ascribe to that, and so fine. Yeah. But a lot of these projects are like minting and saying, "Oh, we're going to build all this utility and game and yada 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 and replicate Bored Ape Yacht Club," and I'm like, "No, this is bullshit," and they're never going to deliver on that. And so it's important to be cautious of that. So we're going to relive these glory days, maybe. I don't know. I think people always ascribe to like this might be the next Bored Ape.
Oh man, I see that so often, and it's just like, yo, they're just picking random things and saying it might be the next Bored Ape, and it's like, yo, it's wild.
I think
that's just
I think what you probably see is like a lot of stitching of like your real world behavior and purchases and activity that are mapped now in an NFT context. So if you go out and buy, I don't know, like an ice cream or pizza, like you might be minted an NFT. Go to a concert, you get an NFT, and so you start collecting you start mapping a lot of your physical like analog activity in a digital context. And that is pretty interesting because then you start building an online persona and profile that then you can transport and you have ownership over that, and then it creates like this flywheel of, hey, then if you've done X and Y, you get invited to a particular game, or there's like you get nudged to do other types of activities. And so I think that is interesting. Also, games, whether Illuvium or just Web2 games that want to play in Web3 land, might consider NFTs as a vehicle and strategy to kind of have capture and just become relevant. I think NFTs are pretty interesting. So anyways, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. I'll ask one last thing on this, and then we can move on to the GameFi stuff, because I agree with you about like the analog experiences in NFT format, right? I think that's actually what's going to onboard people. Like the example I gave in the last Illuva talks with Andrew on that was like, for me, I think like a loyalty card, a Starbucks loyalty card as an NFT is more likely going to onboard a lot more people to the technology compared to gaming. Like, for example, yes, I do understand that gaming, like there are a lot of gamers in the world, but for example, like parents and like my mom isn't a gamer, like, and I'm sure a lot of moms aren't gamers. And I think something like a loyalty card is probably what's going to actually onboard like those type of people more than games are. And so I agree with you, buying ice creams and things like that, like movie tickets, airplane tickets. I agree with you with that. The question though with that is, how long do you think it's actually going to take for them to be open to understanding and actually utilizing that technology? Because we agree on how it's going to be done. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. Like you have luxury brands like Gucci and accepting Bored Ape, like Ape Coins payment, and you have Tiffany's most recently did like 300 or so of punks, and I think luxury brands really understand, and not just luxury brands. I think like Starbucks is set to kind of create their own loyalty kind of program that is mapped to I don't know the particulars of it, but it's something that I'm paying attention. It should happen like this quarter or next. Yeah. And so I think like, it takes like one of those big brands to then just kind of set the standard, and then everyone races to just be as competitive, because it's clear that like, especially younger generations, which are the most highest LTV ones, I think, for a lot of these brands, they want to be relevant. These brands are struggling in one way, shape, or form to acquire customers. And so you now have a way, like you understand the younger generations love NFTs and are captivated by Web3 and the idea, the ethos behind it. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of speculation behind it, but there's always been speculation in any like technological trend. Like not like, we shouldn't dismiss things because it's pure speculation. There are underlying things of this technology that I think really resonate with people, with gamers, with collectors, with consumers. And so ultimately, I think brands are slowly waking up to this idea that in order for them to be relevant in this, next, couple of decades, and a big part of that is going to have to be transitioning and utilizing this technology, i.e. NFTs. But it's just my guess.
You're muted.
Yeah, really, I was muted. I was typing and I pressed M. No, I agree. I agree with you. All right, man. So let's actually move on to a GameFi, right? Because that's obviously what we're more clued up on, and would love to hear your take as well. So obviously, with the rise and fall of GameFi V1, with GameFi V2 coming out, like V1 meaning Axie, pretty much like that's probably the pinnacle of V1 GameFi. Talk to us about your thesis for GameFi V2. What are you bullish about? Explain why you're bullish in that way, and what are you cautious about? Because obviously, GameFi V1, we saw the flaws of like unsustainable, like tokenomics and things like that. Is that the only kind of downfall that you can see happening for GameFi V2? Is there anything else that maybe we're not talking about yet that you're seeing and talking amongst your peers? Talk to us about that, man.
Yeah, I think I would say that GameFi 1.0 is more like Axie type, which even the team there has like openly been like, hey, there's been issues with creating a sustainable in-game economy, and so ultimately you have to rework it and say, no, actually, we have to create really immersive games that attract spenders, not just earners or people that want to speculate and earn. And so I think I was just talking to a founder that is building a really interesting game. He's self-funded it himself, and he's working with like brands to incentivize people to, like, in their particular place, go to a particular restaurant or place, and then you earn some rewards, like kind of like a version of Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
But he says, look, the reward is never going to be like Axie in the glory days, if you will, or like, it's just not sustainable. But what he says is, we always tell our players, like, you're going to do this in your free time. It's just an added incentive to do it. If you're like out and about in the park, and then all of a sudden you can play this game in your free time, and you kind of like can go to a particular place and meet other people and socialize, and at the same time like get some sort of a reward if you do it. Like, I think like behavioral economics like teaches us that a lot of times people want to do things not necessarily purely for economic interest, but because they socialize and they can like connect with other people, and it's just purely because they want to do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And I think we are going to have to move more in that direction, and successful games are going to have to, one, be actually games, i.e., would you play this even if there's no reward?
Yes.
And that to me is a game. If you're not there, then you're not a game. You're something else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's what I'm looking at. And more so, I think like there will be a game out there that is going to capture not just one, it's going to capture a lot of attention, and a lot of users are going to draw and start playing the game, but then layer on top of that other services to the users that are just playing the game and spending, 30, 40, 50 minutes a day. Then, you have a lot of attention and time, and then how you can really do other interesting stuff around that. Like we just done. And so that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
So you're discussing us moving away from playing and earning so much as I mean, earning probably should never match the amount you spend on a game and things like that. I think Illuvium has this fantastic dichotomy of a very clear split between investing and playing, and they're two very different demographics of people. Do you think many future blockchain games are going to follow this similar structure where investing and playing are two very different activities within the game? For example, like either holding stock of Blizzard or playing World of Warcraft. That's kind of how I see GameFi V2 shaping up.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think that distinction needs to be made clear. And ultimately, I think there's a coexistence of both just pure kind of investors, if you will, landholders or what have you, versus just pure players.
Yeah.
And there's a big overlap. That Venn diagram might have a lot of overlap between people that are obviously, investors. Like you have a Apple stock, but you also have Apple products. Like, there's a big overlap between the two.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I was actually, that's a perfect kind of segue into the question that I wanted to ask as well, is because right now I feel like a lot of us, or when I say a lot of us, there's not us three specifically, like a lot of people in the community and out there that look at in-game, like what we're looking at as in-game assets as investments. they're going into these games thinking, oh, let me buy, like, let's use Illuvium because that's what we kind of know. And even though you can't do this yet, this is just an example. Like, they're going in there saying, yo, I really want to play this game, catch a ramp by, and then sell it for like a whole heap of money. And like, this is a topic that we've covered in our previous podcast, in a different podcast with myself and a couple of other guys. And I just thought it was a fascinating concept that understanding and the distinction between an investment, like, for people looking at the in-game assets as investments instead of in-game assets. What do you think we can actually do to kind of like educate people on that? Because I think, like you say, we need to understand that there's an investment route via tokenomics of governance tokens and things like that, and the actual in-game token, in-game assets, which honestly we shouldn't be looking at to make profit. It should be, like you say, focusing on the fun and the experience of it, the social aspect of it. How do we actually go about and educate the masses on this and kind of change that mindset of everything in crypto is 100% an investment?
I think it just starts and ends with having a great product. Like, if you have like a great product and people are playing the game, like everything else kind of falls into place. Like, sure, if you're earning a governance token, that might have some value as a result of you playing the game. Well, it's almost like that's an interesting add-on, but that shouldn't be the prerequisite by which people like gravitate towards the game.
Yeah.
It's like, we use Twitter. I love Twitter. I don't get compensated for it. I mean, I guess I could buy the stock and be like, okay, I'm inherently like one of the daily active users. It's not a bot. And so that stock should have more value but I don't it's not really that. But, we use certain platforms, social media platforms and other services that are free, but in exchange for that, we don't get compensated that much. Or if you're a creator and you're driving a lot of traffic to YouTube that is then monetizing because you have millions of views, you get paid a very inequitable amount.
Yeah.
It's pretty unfair payout. Now, of course, they have distribution. They've done some other things. They do the hosting. They do a lot of services. So fine.
Yes.
But I do think that, as Kieran had a really good tweet yesterday, which is, as soon as people understand that they can play a really fun game and then discover, oh, wow, like I'm actually own part of this game. I can influence this game. I can contribute and create content for this game. Then that's really the aha moment that a lot of people are going to have and say, wow, like why would I go back to Web 2?
Yes.
But I think it needs to be that most users will be drawn to these games, not because of speculation, not because I can make some money. It's purely because, wow, this game's actually really fun. And I think Kieran has been emphasizing that more recently, and I think it's the right tone, which is, we're not going to settle until we build a game, Web3 game, that is at parity with Web 2 and we'll hold ourselves to the highest standard. Because most people, like, ultimately, I think where crypto will go, hopefully in the next 5-10 years, is most people start using it not because it's crypto, but purely because it's just better. It's like they might not even realize that they're using a Web3 or playing a Web3 game. Yeah. We're going to stop using these distinctions. It's in the same way that, like, in the 90s, there were people that were like referring to internet businesses. Like, think about how that terminology has gone away. You don't like now, like, we use technology, I guess, like software businesses, like pure tech businesses, referring to stocks, but every business out there uses, in some way, shape, or form, is technology enabled. Internet, uses the internet. And in the same way, like, every business is going to use Web3 Rails, no matter who you are, whether you're a bank or a consumer brand or whatever. Like, you're just going to use these things to enhance and supplement your business model. It's just going to be part of your operating, like, strategy. And so I think, like, Kieran, in my mind, is one of the few founders in the space that really, I think, has it right by saying we're competing against Web 2, and it's not enough to say, oh, you're going to earn an NFT and a governance token. Yeah, but our game is crappy. Like, ta-da. This doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so I really I ascribe and admire that type of philosophy, because I think it's the right strategy long-term and will be the winning one.
Yeah. All right. And actually, Matt, it's perfect that you're saying all of this because I've got a really interesting question. And because you're an advisor for quite a few GameFi projects, and I'd love to get your take on this. Because you're saying that we want to try and essentially make games that in Web3 that are equivalent or are equal in quality to in Web2 games. And right now, so one of the things that I'm seeing, and it's a clear thing that's happening, is free-to-play games are winning. Like you see your League of Legends, you see your Fortnite, you see your Fall Guys when it first came out. Among Us, right? All of these games that really kind of blow up, they're all free to play. These new IPs essentially are free to play, and that's how they get the market. Like I understand that a Call of Duty, a FIFA, they can charge you full price for it because they've got that brand recognition, right? The same way that Louis Vuitton charges a crazy amount, and people are happy to pay for it for that brand recognition. But for new IPs coming into the space, and especially a competitive space such as gaming, do you think that this is something that I'm really happy that Illuvium is doing? Having it free to play where there's no cost of entry into the IP, do you think that's actually going to be necessary for all of for games in Web3 to actually even participate in the market on a decent level? Or do you think there is a way for an entry price for an IP and there's still a way that they can compete? What do you think?
I'm not sure I understand the question that well, to be honest.
Sorry. So, like, do you think that it's necessary for new IPs being developed, to have a free-to-play entry point? Or do you think there are some things that, like, for example, actually you need to buy them to play it? Do you think that's the way that we're going to be forward?
It's a great question. I think, I mean, this is why you had guilds, right? To finance, like, buying the 3 axes needed to play. I think the model of free to play is pretty interesting. It's been highly successful. And I think this goes back to the idea of like how you construct the game and how much scarcity do you have. And we had a lot of discussion around like how to price the land and all this stuff. And ultimately, I think you choose abundance because that's what supports like, I guess the question is, would you rather have a game that is played by billions of people, or would you rather have a game that's played by like, 100,000 people? And like a lot of times in crypto have thought about from the Bitcoin context of thinking about scarcity as being the factor that drives value. But I don't believe in that. I think it is adoption and usage that drives value, particularly for games, and not scarcity. And so I think we need to shift up. If you're building a game, I think the mindset should be abundance and creating an opportunity for as many players to come in, experiment and play and interact and even contribute and build their own paths. And so, I think like sometimes this goes back to the idea of like, sometimes we think, there's only X amount of NFTs being minted. It must be rare. And so there must be value. I'm like, no, actually, no, it may as well be worth 0. The idea of IP is interesting, but not necessarily like, I think IP is a very fuzzy concept. Like what is IP and what does that mean in an open source context? And so I'm not like very like, I guess like you could go out and buy like the media rights for like the Beatles or like Pink Floyd or whatever. And like, I guess, it has a ton of value. But I think in this open source world, I mean, certainly there's IP of these game studios that they're creating, like Axes or Illuvium. Like, absolutely, there's a lot of like really cool artwork, and that I think is IP. But I don't think the value. Like a lot of times we obsess about IP as being like that thing that drives value. Like, I hold the IP, I own the IP, and so fine. But ultimately, I think I'm very interested in this Creative Commons idea. People kind of like what NounsDAO is doing, and just people having even Bored Apes, like, people contributing. Like people have like coffee shops that are like now Bored Apes coffee shops. And, ultimately at the end of the day, it is what drives value is I think everything is an attention game. And if you can capture attention, that creates value. I think it's easier to monetize once you have a lot of attention.
Yes.
And so a lot of times IP gets in the way of really building valuable and useful services and products for people because companies tend to be super protective about their IP. And then that I think gets in the way of this kind of creative process of having contributors of all kinds like add and kind of build on top of this IP. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like artists are really moving this direction where like music NFTs, for instance, are a pretty interesting concept. Like, I'm not endorsing them per se, but I think if like artists are now have the ability to connect with them directly. And so like the value of the artist is also to some extent, like, think about how much like, people are doing TikToks of like the concert of a particular artist. Like, they're adding to the value of this artist, right? And so I think artists like 3Loud are recognizing that and saying, hey, yeah, maybe our earliest adopters and fan base should participate in the royalties, i.e. the IP.
Yes.
Like, right? So if you're the IP holder of the royalty of music, then you're earning some fees per stream, and you're sharing that with the people that have like built you up. And I think that's a pretty interesting concept.
Yeah, I'm super bullish on that concept on music. Because I do believe that, like, if you're giving away, like, I don't know how much it is, let's say 10% of the royalties per track or whatever it is in NFTs, and the people that are supporting you, your fans, like you say, they're going to be making TikToks, they're going to be pushing you, and essentially what you're doing is you're kind of, one, cultivating your fan base, but second, you're pretty much hiring a marketing team that's getting equity in you. So to me, it makes perfect sense, and I think that music, we haven't really seen it done to the level that it's going to be yet, but I think that, yes, I think NFTs and music are going to be a massive, massive thing. Sorry, Scoriox, I keep cutting you off, man.
No, that's all good. I just wanted to circle back a little bit, but it definitely lends itself to this discussion as well. Is we talked about how, especially in Kieran's thesis, Web3 games need to compete with Web2. Now, I don't think personally that ownership is enough. What I mean by that is I think crypto and NFTs need to be implemented in a unique way that makes sense for putting that game on the blockchain. For example, if you have a shooter game, why would anyone choose a shooter game over Call of Duty? Being a better game isn't enough. Having ownership isn't enough. It needs to have unique tokenomics and economic systems that make sense to put crypto in there. I'm not a fan of throwing crypto into everything because it's a buzzword, right? A good example of this I can think of is something like World of Warcraft, where they already have an in-game economy. Tokenizing it makes a lot of sense. The other example is things like Minecraft, where people built their own marketplaces and shops online around the Minecraft IP and then had their own business model built into the Minecraft IP. I think tokenizing things like that into NFTs and things makes a lot of sense. Do you think we're going to see more unique tokenomics and NFT models come out from Web3 that will actually make games impossible to create with Web2?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think crypto can be complementary to some of these Web2 brands. But it's, I would definitely agree with everything you've said, which is a lot of times crypto is not necessary and it's not the solution for everything. There's actually very few specific use cases why you'd want to use this technology, but they're important and meaningful ones, but it shouldn't be applied to everything. That's a mistake we did in last cycle. We try to slap the word and a token to everything. It's like, it doesn't work.
Yeah. It's actually pretty interesting because I was watching, I don't know if you guys saw this or seen it, but I was watching a clip of Joe Rogan talking to Zuckerberg. And it was actually interesting, just the way that Zuckerberg was speaking now, like the words he was using about ownership and governance. And it's like, a lot of these words are words that we kind of see that are really big and like the buzzwords of Web3. And even we can start to see it now that they're starting to think and use this stuff in and kind of, how do you condition Web2 users to hearing these words. And I think that's very fascinating, especially for a company like Meta, because again, that's where most people spend their time. So if they can condition the mass markets to being okay with these things, I think that's going to help with onboarding in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people have been very skeptical of Facebook, and rightfully so. I get it. But they're evangelizing the metaverse. At least, their own version. But at least, look, they have north of 2 billion users that they can introduce their version of crypto. Fine, it's not that perfect utopian version of crypto that we all love and pure version of it. But nonetheless, think about the flow, right? All of a sudden, 3 billion people or 2.5 billion people get exposed to digital assets. And then they're like, okay, what else can I do? oh, wait a minute. There's this other world that exists. And
Mm.
I mean, what percentage of those billions of people do you think convert to pure Web3 as we like it? It's not zero. It's not 100%,
Mm.
but it's sure hell more people that are in this world today.
Yes.
And that's positive. That's a win. And so we shouldn't, I mean, look, if they want it, like with Libra, a lot of people are like, oh my God, they're going to launch a stablecoin. It's not really a stablecoin. I'm like, guys, why don't you see the bright side of it, which is like they're evangelizing and credentializing the category.
Yes.
Open source always wins.
Yeah.
It's a matter of time. And time and time again, people have like tried to launch their own closed versions of stuff. But you can't stop open source innovation and the compounding effects of that and the value that gets created in an open source world.
Yeah.
If people want to pretend that they're open source, fine. Ultimately, people realize that it's not, and then they migrate to open source land. And then they build much more cooler products and versions of closed source products and services and networks. And ultimately, like that's the bright side of all this is if Facebook wants to evangelize their own, I'm not worried about the scenario where like a lot of people like are duped into thinking that that's like truly Web3. I think, but it is incumbent. Yeah, it's surely a risk, but we can't control what Facebook does. There's going to be other companies that are going to try to do that.
Yeah.
But again, what we can do and focus as a community and as builders is build a goddamn product that is a parity or superior to Web2. And you can do that. Think about DeFi. You can do that. You can create services that are faster, better, and cheaper. Anyone can be a capital, like a market maker by providing liquidity on Uniswap. Anyone can like issue and get a loan without like all these like, friction points on Aave and Compound. Like technology wins if it's only faster, better, and cheaper. If we're not fulfilling those three categories, or in large part 2 out of the 3, then go home. Like honestly, just go home and stop building.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Humans are very practical beings. Our attention span is only going lower and lower. And to assume that people are just going to use your thing because you believe in this technology, but they don't see the ultimate benefit, go home. Pack up your shit and go.
Foolish. Yeah, 100%.
It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I think, again, this is why I very much will reiterate the strategy, the tone, and the mindset of the laser focus of Kieran on creating a killer product is the right strategy. And I think other founders would be wise to kind of embrace that mentality. And let's be honest, like it's okay. Like we've been on this like infrastructure deployment phase for crypto for the last 10 years. It's fine. Like there's still a lot of innovation on that front. We're seeing some really interesting developments on the L2 front that credibly you can see a path towards like supporting a lot of users. And I think this next cycle will be, can we actually, and this is an open question, can we actually build products and services that are not only at parity, but fully superior to Web2 products? And the consumer sees that. Because as a builder, you always are enamored with the things of yours. It's like, why wouldn't anyone want to use DeFi over their banks? Like whoever uses it. But we should be more realistic and be more practical in that assessment of, is this product really good? And there's a lot of friction still and things that will be solved, but like it's still difficult for people to use crypto, and that's fine. Look, in many ways, there's still a lot of hacks happening. There's a lot of security risks.
Yes.
But I think the more we can abstract away those complexities, make it easier for people, they will come, because NFTs are just telling you that the NFTs have like captivated the imagination of a large number of people that otherwise wouldn't have been interested in just Ethereum or DeFi. But NFTs, I've said it, and I'll say it again, NFTs and gaming are making crypto very relatable. Now it's incumbent on us to build really cool products and make it easy and safe and a friendly experience for them to join and stick around.
Yeah, and agree.
I have a really interesting question, and it directly relates to this. Whereas currently every single crypto token is tied to a project directly linked to crypto users in one way or another, the audience, the sorts of people that like that sort of stuff, whatever. It's directly related to them. And in that sense, everything follows Bitcoin, Ethereum, so on and so forth, and tech stocks and things like that. Do you think as you get a product that is marketed to someone like gamers who are putting money into a game, have potentially nothing to do with crypto, do you think something like a AAA game could decouple in the crypto markets in terms of price action? Or do you not see that happening until there's mass adoption?
Yeah, a lot of people like to ask this question. Like, I don't know. I don't like. I think long term, yes. Like, and I think that's going to be a signal that crypto is maturing, like as an asset class. I would say near term, probably no, because a lot of it would just be correlated to like Bitcoin and then technologies like the Nasdaq, because we're in really new, interesting, uncertain times in the global economy and markets. And like, I just don't know, right? Like we have rising interest rates,
Hmm.
we have geopolitical tension, we have inflation, and everything is just behaving like really weird. And I think even the smartest investors are just of the mind that like we just don't know. Like this time is a bit different, and different not in the good ways, it's different in the I don't know what the hell is going on and how markets are reacting and central banks are doing. So long story short, I don't know if they're going to decouple near term, but I would be shocked if at some point crypto within the correlation within crypto doesn't decouple because
Mm.
you know a game is very different than a DeFi protocol than it is to Bitcoin. And so ultimately those three things behave differently, have different type of users, different type of investors. And I think we can expect that as the industry grows from what is a trillion today, which is a speck of dust in the world in financial markets, to an industry of 10 trillion plus, which we'll get there. I think like this industry is not going away. Like my bet is we're at least going to be a $10 trillion like market like asset class in the next 5 years, and that ultimately means that if that scenario plays out, you're going to have very different and diverse set of market participants, and it's going to mature to a point where the folks that are believing and investing in crypto are different than those that are believing and investing in gaming, different than those in DeFi. And so that to me feels like correlation will break at some point. The tight correlation between Bitcoin and everything else is going to break.
Yeah.
And you started seeing early indications of that like towards the end of the last cycle, but then macro just kind of took everything by storm. And it's like, no, whatever central banks want to do is how markets are going to behave, and everything is just a risk on asset. And that's it. I mean, that's the state of the world we're in. And so anyways, I'm not a near-term speculator, I'm not a trader. It's hard to predict these things, but
well,
I take comfort in the fact that, like, again, if it's a great product, can you name a really killer product that hasn't accrued and created meaningful value and has been like a secular trend? Like the internet started in the 90s, even before that. In earnest, like you had the 90s as the first experimentation. Then you had software as a service in the early 2000s. Like in that period, you had the NASDAQ crash, you had wars, you had all kind of noise and whatever, global financial crisis. But like, what did the stock of Google and Amazon do? Over, like, if you zoom out, there's a ton of value that has been created. Like the composition of the S&P 500 has changed so much in the last couple of years, last 20 years, from being mostly focused on industrial companies that are largely now bankrupt to companies like Tesla.
33% tech now, I think, so around there. Yeah,
exactly. And the largest, most valuable companies in the world are tech. Like that was not the case like 10 years ago or like 15 years ago. Now think of how that composition of that is going to change in the next 10 years, and what percentage of that is going to be like captured by digital assets.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I think that's to me is always like, if you have a patient and longer than one term horizon, like you want to be investing in secular trends. For me, this movement is very much a secular trend. I believe that there's going to be a lot of value that will be created, a lot of different business models that we haven't even conceived of yet. And so if you're around, if you're here, you're early, and ultimately it's just pay attention. And most importantly, use these things. Because if you're using it, I mean, you guys use this stuff, you're playing Illuvium, you're interacting with some of these communities. And, that to me has always been the best way and the highest probability of like catching these trends early and really believing and having conviction and kind of the long term that there's real value in this technology. It's not perfect. I don't think anyone here agrees that this technology is in its perfect state, if that ever exists. But I think we have enough signs and indications that like A, it's here to stay. B, it's going to really truly transform how people think about like their interactions with companies that they're currently and services that they're currently using, and choosing a Web3 alternative versus a Web2 alternative. No question about it. Like no question about it. And more and more people are waking up to that idea.
Agree. Yeah, 100% every day, man. Yo, look, we're at that 1 hour mark. I'm just going to ask one last lightning round question. You don't need to go into super in-depth. Just you can give us a quick answer. If you want to elaborate, you can, but it is what it is. We've had this question before. NFTs. Do you think we need a rebranding? Do you think that we need to change from NFTs to something else? Or do you think NFTs, that the name is here to stay?
No, I think it's here to stay. I don't think you're going to see this crypto Web3 rebranding, because like I think crypto has like stigma and very bad connotation in the mind of a lot of people still. But NFTs are kind of it's like a warm fuzzy word. Okay, like a lot of people say, oh, NFTs are just a cash grab, but that's the problem with the artists, like that are just like doing bullshit stuff that they do with tequila brands and some other crap. Like that's the problem with the artists. But no, NFTs I think is a good word. I think if we survey like 100,000, 200,000 people, they would say like NFTs, yeah, like they're cool. They're like I don't know, like younger cool kids do these days. Not like crypto. Oh God, that's what drug lords and criminals use and terrorists use. You know what I mean? Like you get a very different type of response when you ask people NFTs. They might be like, oh, I don't believe they have value, but it's not like
it's not terrorism.
That thing is named terrorism. Like Web3 is the rebrand for crypto, and for people that have been super critical of crypto to say, no, I'm not a crypto investor. I'm a Web3 investor. They say face, but NFTs now.
True.
I'm super grateful for that answer, man, because actually we were asked that question on Illuvium Talks with Andrew, and me and Scoriox were both on the panel on the same time. I agree with you. I think the NFTs are fine. Scoriox disagreed. So with you saying that, essentially means that my opinion was right, and we are on the winning side.
I didn't say it. But, you know.
Wait. Give me a turn here. It was more that non-fungible tokens, non-fungible is a barrier in terms of explaining it. And I definitely think education will be big in the space. But I think things like digital collectibles, especially in gaming, will resonate a lot more with newer people coming into the space and newer gamers and things. But I definitely agree that NFTs as a general term outside of gaming and for crypto assets and ownership in general is definitely here to stay, because I think it's an important it's important to discern it, and it's important to educate in that area as well. So, but I definitely think digital collectibles for gaming is going to be important.
Agree with you. Too long of a word though. So
NFT.
You need an acronym. You need an acronym to go like mainstream, like NFTs. Digital collectible. TLDR. Like too long to not read that. Digital collectible. It's a ramble. I agree with you. It's a more precise terminology, but hey, it's sort of like it's not the right answer. It's like the most popular answer. It's like Family Feud.
That's why Dogecoin. But all right, cool. Yo, and yes, Annie, I see Annie in chat, but we will be discussing this exact same thing on the other podcast, Gaming on the Block, as well. So that'll be a fun one. But all right, yo, guys, I hope you guys understand why I said Santiago is by far my favorite guest to have on the podcast. Yo, like the insight is nuts. Like the insight is nuts, yo. Hey man, yo, blush as much as you want. I appreciate you, man. Honestly, I know you're super busy. I really appreciate you coming on. Before I give you the final say, again, I need to just once again mention that this is Augment is sponsored by Illuvium. So like I said at the very start, there's so much going on, man. Illuvitas, just everything. Look, guys, I'm not going to repeat it. Check the Discord. That's the best way to stay up to date. Also, I didn't mention at the start, Augment Clips. The link is down below. We're pumping out daily content there as well. So you can imagine how many clips we're going to put out from this podcast. So yeah, again, firstly, Scoriox, thank you for staying up late, man. I appreciate you. Santiago, appreciate you, man. Any last words you want to close out with? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to shill? Go for it.
Thanks heaps for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here. And yeah, really great questions by the audience, Hani, and a bunch of other folks that I recognize. And yeah, this is it's great. Thanks for inviting me on, and I'll say it again. Happy to be here another time. So
cool.
Appreciate the opportunity to come on.
We'll definitely take you up on that.
Yeah, definitely. Don't say that, man. You gotta stop saying that.
Let's maybe do it at a time where Scoriox doesn't get dumped by his girlfriend because he keeps doing it at 2 a.m. And I think that next time, let's actually rework it, or let's get you a laptop so that we. That's my. Let's just make sure that happens.
It was supposed to be yesterday. Yesterday she's not here, so that would have been just a lot easier.
We'll sort it out.
Yeah. I remember last time we recorded, she was also like tossing and turning in the background. So she's like hearing about crypto, people toss and turn. So we don't need more drama and aggravation in your life. That's correct. So, anyways, I really appreciate the flexibility of the time, and thanks everyone for joining.
Easy.
Appreciate. All right, guys. Everyone, thank you guys for watching. Like always, like, subscribe, notifications. You guys know what to do, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow with new videos. Yeah, peace.
All right. Take care.